it never fails every year come the NFL draft process. You'll have those guys that are the workout warriors that light the combine on fire, light it up on the pro days and on the interview circuit, and they end up going a lot higher than many people anticipate, and frankly, a lot higher than maybe they deserve to go. And then on the flip side, you'll have those guys that struggle a little bit in that pre-draft process. They don't light up the combine. They don't light up the pro days. And as a result, their draft stock suffers. And you see this happen a lot where you see very productive college players that you think will really translate well to the NFL level go lower than they should be. And sometimes they end up doing that for a reason because maybe they were just productive at the college level, but they don't really have the skills necessary to translate that similar production to the NFL. And sometimes it's just a matter of teams overthinking it and getting too complicated and trying to out-cute and out-sleuth themselves, and in the process, passing on a really good player and prospect. And when I look at that category, I look at a guy like Rashad Greene from Florida State, and I think he most definitely fits into that area right there. I look at him, and there's a lot that I see that I really like about his game. Here's a guy that has the ability to play both outside and in the slot. He is willing and able to go over the middle of the field. And for a guy that's not 6'4", 220, 225 pounds, that's an important skill to have because at the NFL level, a guy like Rashad Greene at times is going to have to line up in the slot, if not make his living out of the slot. So you want a slot guy that is fearless, a slot guy that is willing to go over the middle. And Rashad Greene, throughout his career at Florida State, demonstrated the ability to do so. What I really like about him, too, is he's a guy that's tough and competitive. He's always a guy, to me, that seemed to put his all into his play. Here was a guy that was also competitive in the sense that he seemed to shine when the spotlight was the biggest. But on top of that, more so, he was a consistent performer. He wasn't a guy that you didn't know what you were going to get or you didn't know what to expect. Here was a guy that it seemed like every week he put on his shoulder pads. You knew what you were going to get out of him, and you knew he was ultimately going to produce. And there's an admirable quality there for guys like that that bring that to the table, and he does. I also like the fact that he shows me a lot of effort as a blocker, which, again, as I've mentioned when talking about other prospects like the Tyler Lockett's and the Philip Dorsetts of the world, when you have those slot receivers out there, you don't want that to be an indication of as soon as they hit the field that you're automatically going to throw every single time because that can make your offense somewhat predictable. Well, Rashad Greene is at least a willing and semi-effective blocker, enough to the point where having him on the field doesn't tip you off to what you're going to do on offense. He also has the ability to get some of that yak. He can rack up that yak, which is very important for a guy of his size and of his skill set. He has that ability not so much to run through tacklers, but to make some tacklers miss and make some defenders miss in the open field. And the one thing I saw about Rashad Greene quite a bit was that he was a really good route runner, to me anyways, in the sense that he seemed to get open a lot. And not only did he get open, he got open by a lot. That ability to get separation, if you could do it at the college level, at some point in time, you'd have to think that translates to the NFL level. And you look at a guy like Rashad Greene and you sit there and say to yourself, based off of his productiveness at Florida State, the fact that he didn't experience a big drop-off in 2014 after Kelvin Benjamin left after 2013, you're like, well, why aren't more people talking about this guy? Why isn't he rated higher? Why is he a prospect that's falling through the cracks a little bit? Well, there's a few reasons for that. Number one, he's not a guy that's 6'4", 6'5", 230 pounds. Or he's not the type of guy that maybe is 5'9", 5'10", that can sit there and burn a 4.35 40. So he doesn't fit into the category of electric, quick, fast, and explosive. And he doesn't have that big prototype number one outside wide receiver type of size. So there's some concerns about where he's going to be able to play at the NFL level. Is he explosive enough, being all of 6 foot, maybe 175, 180 pounds, to be able to play on the outside as a number one or number two wide receiver? Is he going to be best suited in the slot, where his really thinnish frame could cause some concerns about his durability come the NFL level? He also lacks that big-time size that you would want and expect and need out of a number one wide receiver on the outside. So again, is he going to be a guy that predominantly has to line up in the slot to be effective at the NFL level, where again, he's not the quickest, not the most explosive, not the fastest type of guy? That's not really his game. And when you combine that with his thinnish frame and the fact that he doesn't carry a lot of weight, That could lead to some durability concerns because he is willing to go over the middle. He is the type of guy that can play out of the slot and play effectively. That could lead to some big hits. That could lead to some durability concerns, no question. There are times, too, with Rashad Greene, I was surprised with how much he struggled with the dropsies. He had some issues with drops. He would make some great, spectacular plays, but man, he would have some really bad drops too, some really bad lapses in concentration. And when you also look at Rashad Greene too, you wonder if 2013 in part was a product of playing on the other side of Kelvin Benjamin. And both with 2013 and 2014, it was the fact that he was having the ball thrown to him by a guy who most likely is going to be the #1 overall pick in this year's NFL draft in Jameis Winston. You look at Rashad Greene and the way he was utilized, the way he was rolled out there. Was he a product of the system in part, especially with the talent that was surrounding him? Is he a guy that is really productive on his own merits, or in part because of what else surrounded him or what other mitigating circumstances and factors that there were? These are questions and legitimate questions for a guy like a Rashad Greene. So when we come to an NFL comparison, I compare him as a prospect to Jarvis Landry in the sense that, not so much in terms of their specific games, because Greene is quicker and faster than Landry, but Landry, I think, was a superior route runner and definitely had superior hands. What I like about both of them, and this is where they're similar, and I know I've used Jarvis Landry for another comparison and probably will use it again, but you look at a guy who was a highly productive college player, but lacked the big-time explosiveness like in Landry's case. He didn't have the big-time explosiveness of a guy of similar size like an Odell Beckham Jr., his teammate at LSU. So it caused him to drop. He also didn't have that 6'3", 6'4", 6'5" height and size that teams value out of a #1 wide receiver, the guys like the Kelvin Benjamins of the world, what have you. Therefore, as a result, Jarvis Landry dropped. Well, you could see a similar thing happen with Rashad Greene here. Here's a guy who was able to get open. Here was a guy that was consistent. Here was a guy that was able to produce. But here's a guy that also lacks that big-time explosiveness, quickness, and speed down the field, that lacks that big-time size to play full-time on the outside. That will cause him to drop in the draft. And again, when you look at the fact that this is another really good wide receiver class similar to last year, you will sit there and see teams take a pass on a guy like a Rashad Greene, similar to how they did a Jarvis Landry, because he doesn't have that big-time speed, explosiveness, and quickness, or that big-time size. But I assure you, Rashad Greene is going to be able to get to the NFL level, and he's going to hit the ground running. This is a guy to me that I look at similar to Jarvis Landry, a late round 2 to early to mid round 3 prospect that could come in and be a productive NFL wide receiver right away. He might never be one of the 3 or 5 best receivers in this draft class, but he most certainly will end up in the top 10, and he'll most certainly make a team happy that he fell to them and other teams mad that they got fooled and full of themselves and passed on him for a guy that was faster or a guy that was bigger.